I was not dealing enough damage to beat his first phase. After doing a bit of measuring, I was pretty sure it was by a few hundred damage at least. Not gonna lie, when I saw this, I was pretty much ready to throw in the towel, but I hit the lab anyway. Seals to improve my corporal abilities, no luck. A full slot of flat damage seals instead? Definitely no luck. But the more I kept fighting enemies, the more I realized something. These trooper abilities were increasing my damage very little, if they were at all. Basically how the damage works in this game is whenever you throw out an attack, the game rolls a damage range at random, and deals that much damage. I didn't realize, but because of this, I was under the impression that these troopers were actually improving my damage when they really weren't. Also, my Fierce Battle Seals, I unequipped some of my gear with it, and for some reason my target drops were still dealing roughly the same damage. What does this all mean? Basically, with damage percent increases, I found that there is a cap. These troopers do contribute to this damage cap, and I don't think it includes the corporal, which just gives me passive bonus damage, but I did work out that the damage percentage cap was somewhere between 325% and 400%, and activating 3 of these troopers with increased brawler damage by an unreasonable amount would actually still achieve this damage percentage maximum. This of course meant that some of these brawl buffing seals were redundant if I activated all 3 troopers. Based on some of my calculations, I'm pretty sure that each of these troopers gives about 125% bonus brawler damage per activation, and this is how much an unreasonable amount of damage actually is. Does it mean I grinded all those other brawler seals for nothing? Not quite, because don't forget I still need these troopers to be fully charged before being able to use them, and at least if I didn't have them available, I could still just equip the brawler stuff and still be able to deal a lot of damage. When these troopers were activated, I would just be better off equipping gear that gave me flat damage bonuses, since flat damage bonuses don't actually have a cap. In fact, I'm pretty sure that with certain weapon seals it works the same, where there might be a bonus damage cap percentage, but I never tested that part fully. Once I did find this out though, it did make the headband useless, since with the other 2 equipment pieces only, I was basically at that percentage cap, so I never had to use that one again. Anyway, after a bunch more grinding, I went to the smith and crafted more gear, this time with just champion seals on all possible slots. Also, I may have had to restart from the beginning since this part prevented me from visiting the blacksmith, but that's okay.
None shall pass. What?
That's when I actually managed to record a one-shotting Nishiki while I was at it. Moment of truth, I was super nervous. If this didn't work, I can confidently say I would have had no other ideas. Flat damage equipment on. Troopers activated. I was so happy to see it worked. It did mean I'd have to change my approach a little and swap equipment mid-fight depending on the situation, but look, the important thing is I managed to get to the second phase of the fight with a single punch, and I beat him in the second, and that marked the last battle of Chapter 5. Chapter 6 was a long dungeon section with 2 total bosses, and it really wasn't that difficult, but it did require a lot of resets. After getting through to Shimano, I downed him in 2 shots, and next it was another long dungeon section, which for me was tougher than the first half because of 2 enemies in particular. First, because of this gun dude. You can target drop bullets for some reason, but the timing is strict, and if I messed up, I obviously had to start all over again. The second was because of this guy who keeps his sword sheathed. He will unleash a strong attack that knocks you down, and I'm pretty sure it's impossible to target drop him without risking doing a wake-up punch. Still though, with enough damage buffs and actually being able to use these wake-up punches, I managed to do it with the help of my troopers. I cannot understate how many tries this took, to be completely honest, and it was very frustrating. Also probably because, on reviewing the footage, I noticed this game actually bugged and none of my troopers had any motivation, which is indicated by this blue bar and decreases the more you use their abilities. Fun fact, motivation also impacts the effectiveness of their abilities. Throughout the run, I also detested fighting the spear units too, because if they were too close, they would use an attack that was difficult to counter. But I learned later that if you stay a little away from them, they'll use attacks that are easier to react to. Next was the Akiyama fight, and I did have to start over just due to that motivation bug, but once I did get to him, I beat both of his phases with one punch each. Chapter 7 started fine. These D-class heroes ambushed me, but didn't give me too much trouble. Next was fighting Kondo-san. I began to get into the rhythm of evading him a bunch of times and just figuring out which of his attacks were easiest to counter, and then start for real on target dropping. I buffed myself up, and I was not even remotely close to beating his first phase with a single punch. This is how much a max damage punch did. This is how much health I'd roughly need to bring him down to in order to get to the next phase of the fight. Easily another 900 damage, roughly, which I knew was not even possible. I was heartbroken to see this was the case, and from this point I knew the challenge was pretty much impossible because of exclusively this fight. Still, I got to this point, why not see how many punches are required to beat the game instead? Having come to terms with this, I just pushed on, and this of course meant that I didn't actually need to deal max damage punches in order to beat this fight. It ended up taking a total of 3 punches for both of his phases. Damn you, Kondo-san. Chapter 8 was just a long-ass dungeon section with Majima that I had to fight at the end. These showdown guys were also super annoying to deal with since you can drop them, and by this point they had enough health that I could no longer use a knockdown punch to one-shot them. Eventually though, I had an idea. Style switching was allowed, but I wasn't allowed to attack using those other styles. I did have an ability that gave me a chance to disarm opponents if I blocked at the right time, leaving them with just their fists. I still wasn't damaging them. The responsible hero prevents accidents from occurring, and I was just making sure they didn't cut themselves or someone else. I found for this section, it was easiest to head these guys into a corner and pray for a multi-hit. This next spear guy had armor and no nearby enemies to be able to drop near him, so I just had to tank the 4-punch deficit in order to beat him. The part with the Gatling gun was kind of funny. As soon as I got close enough to these gunners, I was able to one-shot them and the boss ran away. The game expected me to use this Gatling gun to mow down all these other swordsmen. Guns, however, are dangerous and not the preferred weapon of choice for all heroes. I also found out that if enemies are scared, any strike guarantees a critical hit, which deals much higher damage than regular hits. If I parried, causing enemies to be scared, I'd just do evade and strike, and that would be enough to kill these guys, since these guys were actually much weaker than regular enemies. This part sucked, and I failed many times against these armored mini-bosses. I could have positioned them to be close enough to do tiger drops across all of them, but honestly I couldn't be arsed and just took the punch deficit. Also, for some reason this huge guy had exactly 1500 health, meaning one-shotting his health was just a chance and wasn't guaranteed as long as I didn't use troopers. Next was fighting Majima. First phase I dropped him with one punch no problem, and it turns out I didn't need to do max damage to beat his first phase either. His quick time event I couldn't pass since it would mean I deal damage to him, and I did have a small problem. His second phase had a lot more health, and I couldn't finish this in a single punch even with maximum damage, so it took me a total of 3 punches. Chapter 9 was honestly just a breath of fresh air. I was doing a brawler fight with Saigo and Akiyama, and no equipment or troopers were allowed, but I did have to drop one of them to a certain health cap in order to trigger a quick time event, which also did not do any damage, but it gave me heat and I wanted to avoid that. Currently, heat gives me hyper armor in Brawler, which can be seen as a good thing, but I preferred not to, just in case I got attacked from behind, and I might trigger another heat move. Still, one-shotting and two-shotting one enemy with the health cap was perfectly fine. After getting wasted, Chapter 10 started. These dudes from 1st Division were going around picking fights with me if I came across them. They weren't a huge problem, in fact, I managed to find out I could actually skip one of them by asking Moomin Rider to get me past them. I also decided to take this time to get another Brawler Trooper, whatever good it may have done. Hey, better to have more access to it I suppose, even if I get capped at 3 activations. Moving on, the next Majima fight was up. Sadly the fight took a shocking 5 punches to beat both of his phases, even with max damage. After that there was a long dungeon, but Majima was with me so I just let him do all the killing. Fun fact about the battles where other allies are involved. If they lose all their health, they will take time to recover, but won't start fighting immediately. In order to reactivate them once they're back at full health, you need to move your camera away from them, and then they will start fighting again. Here's another fun fact about this guy. If I never entered eye shot of him, he would never attack me, allowing Majima to just keep attacking him. I still had to kill him though, just because it seems your allies can't finish off boss-like enemies. Finally, I was at the end of the dungeon, and I was up against this guy. Sadly, a single tiger drop would not even finish his first stage, but thankfully I had a friend who did precisely half of Ball Tickle's worth of damage to be able to trickle him down to nothing. I looked at the recording. This fight took almost 11 minutes of me just parrying, blocking, doing basically nothing, while Majima just went to work. I finished with a single basic punch and finished the chapter.